I'm reading the story on the front of the Metro section of the paper today, and I'm thinking about commerce and the benefits and openness of being in commerce. And the story is about how there are ambulance chasing lawyers making good use of commercial data, which would be accident victims and people who are involved in insured mishaps on the highway. Their information is available on police reports. And this data that has driver's license numbers, addresses, and other information publicly available is used by these attorneys to drum up business. They send their retainers or their staff people or their representatives or agents after the victims of families, say, in the bus crash recently that killed 6 and injured many others. The attorneys have used very strong-arm tactics, very persuasive tactics to get people to sign the line and to have them engage these law firms in a speculative investment business, which is what they do. They say, well, you don't have to pay us up front, but we'll work on your behalf, and we will get a contingency fee of a third of the earnings. So the damages are, let's say $1,000, and we will get $333 for our labors. Of course, we're talking here in the tens of thousands or even millions of dollars. And so the law firm invests its time and labor in winning the case and then getting the payout. That's always how big law firms do it. They have reserves with which to live off, pay the wages, pay the bill, pay the paralegals, the copier bill, and so on, travel expenses, and they live off the fat, and while they're generating new business in court, a process that can take years. And so the first entry, the first contact between the lawyer and the victim, or the possible future plaintiff, is the police report. And the story in the paper tells about how now, in light of Jay Kennemer's federal case, there's going to be a locking down of some of that information that is on the public record. What does that say for open records requests? What does that say, for example, if I, your representative here in the press, want to get a copy of a video, or want to get copies of all the litigation, of all the encounter between the state and its agent, the police officer, and a victim, I want to have access to these things. Just need to have the information there. Now, here in this story that involves also Phil Noblett, one of the city attorneys, raises a question about open records and personal injury attorney Jay Kennemer trying to defend the bar. Right, he's a lawyer trying to maintain the integrity of the bar, the honor of this profession, which has effectively allowed all the evils that we have going today, is allowed, encouraged, maintained, and protected by the bar. That is to say, the guild, the union of attorneys who own effectively the law and who prosper by using the law among disputants, and the law serving, of course, the state, and bringing people before it. And lawyers are all about that. They don't overturn that system. They would not dare to overturn that system at all. And so that I was getting notifications from a busy radio station operators here. They're texting me, and I'm sorry. The question is in the venue in which this story takes place. The venue is in Commerce. And now what we have is we have a kind of an odd situation where the state has people in Commerce who really are not, through the licensing process, through the regulatory process under Title 55 of the Tennessee Code. Everybody's in Commerce, but now suddenly we have reports of people in accidents. Let's say their data is commercial data, and now suddenly other parts of the public who are attorneys can't get access to the details, the commercial details about commercial relationships the state has with these people, right? And whose details are available on the police report and through the police report. And so there's a kind of a contradiction. If the state is going to regulate commerce by making all use of the road public, then how can it be that that we have a yielding by at least the city to public records requests, open records requests, requests not necessarily from members of the press or the media, that being two categories, but private parties. So let's say I want to find out about someone and an accident, and I was a witness maybe, or maybe I was a victim, or maybe I was somehow connected with it, and I just want to, maybe my son was in an accident, and I want to go down and find out about it and get the report. Or can I not do that? Is that something that's possible? And apparently, no. That Travis McDonough, the story in the Times Free Press indicates, has somehow agreed that. Well, actually, he was not. He recused himself from the case, but he's mentioned in the story, and so we're wondering about the access to this data. How is it that we have a public record created? Well, again, these are not private parties. Though in the Woodmore school bus crash, there was a private party. I mean, there was a public party, and that was a corporation using the public road for profit and operating a for-profit bus run by an employee, all under commerce, all under Title 55, involved in transportation. Now, transportation is something that's not defined in Tennessee jurisprudence, American jurisprudence. I have a set of that, and I looked this morning. As in a minute, I had a spare minute, and I went as I was helping Jeanette get ready, and I was taking her to get her car. We've had a car in the shop, and we've had to make some alternative arrangements. So I had a spare minute, and I thought, let me just check AMJUR, American jurisprudence, if transportation is discussed, and it's not. Oddly enough, the definition for transportation is also in Black's, the latest edition of Black's, is also not clear. And the reason these things are either not defined and discussed or not clear is because it's important to hide from the general reader what is really happening. I'd like to suggest in Black's, transport is it's entirely neutral. It's entirely an entirely non-legal definition to carry or convey a thing from one place to another. And that's it. And Black's is just an abysmal dictionary anymore. It used to have cases that gave the legal origins in what's called case law of an important concept, or the best definition of a concept was cited by case in Black's dictionary. Now it's just a definition. So there's no legal sense of transportation. Transportation legally is carrying goods or people for hire, right? That's the proper definition of transportation, is that it's a commercial activity, it's for profit, it's on the roadway in some fashion, or on a publicly regulated venues, such as through airports, on the skyways, or rails, which are also state regulated, or on the highway and byways of Tennessee. These are all subject to regulation because they're commercial. Now, what about the private user? Of course, I'm a local economy guy. David Tulis, your host here, the leading Nooga centrist in Chattanooga, where Chattanooga is the center of the universe, right? I want there to be more private activity and less commercial activity. Not that the private activity can't be profitable, but that it be operating, that it be conducted, if you will, outside of the purview of the state. The state claims jurisdiction over far too many things. It is incompetent on most things it tries to regulate and control. And the incompetence is leading us to a national disaster. Just look at at Chattanoogan.com, the quote from Senator David Perdue, a very short quote, in which he says we're kind of at our end. And I would say these things of this kind, the quotes of this kind are telling. You should use them as financial advice. I suggest you should use them to pursue our wonderful argument here on the David Tulis program at Nooga Radio to get out of national and get back into local. In other words, to liquidate national, sell Wall Street, and invest in Main Street. That would be you. Okay, invest in yourself, invest in people you know. And now we have, through the Tennessee Valley Federal Credit Union, we have a well established. Well, this is new, so it's not well established, but we have a respectable financial institution, a financial corporation in Chattanooga, a co-op, and it is hosting a a crowdfunding platform, and that lets local people invest locally within certain limitations and a certain smallness of the amount that you can invest, but still it's a great start. So we have much in commerce, and we have national government overseeing commerce. We have a nationalized economy. We have a debt-based economy where debt is your strength, debt is your wealth, and the more debt you have, the richer you are. It is completely upside down. People are required by their accountants to get into debt now to buy things on time, new trucks, new vehicles, new equipment, new buildings, all to avoid taxation. And the system is incentivizes debt and obligation, and not liberty. A man who does things in cash is irrational today, right? If you do things in cash and pay cash and get cash prices and so on, and don't carry debt, you are irrational in today's economy. This is an unsustainable world, okay, and it's not going to last. It will not last. There are going to be some major changes, and that will be a recognition that we have been living in a debt fantasy, and that the system really works. Right, the fantasy is that things are working out and things will get better. And look at everybody else. Look at the mob. The mob, led by big investment houses such as CalPERS and others, these state sovereign funds. They're going to be hurt badly, and all those teachers and dependents, these state workers all across the country who are relying on for their retirement on these funds may be stiffed, maybe stiffed. So, well, this is David Tulis, and I want to get back to this question about commerce now, and the open records story with Phil Noblett mentioned as the city attorney of record on the story by Zach Peterson in the Times Free Press this morning. The headline is "City agrees to redact personal information in crash reports, resolves federal case." Well, these reports are in commerce, right? They're commercial in nature. Why now are they secret? Why? These are all people who are licensees. Almost everybody involved in an accident is a licensee, and those who aren't are I think wrongfully charged as under the failure to exhibit statute, which applies only to licensees, by the way. The failure to exhibit statute cannot be applied to anybody who's not a licensee. But the state in this matter of the free traveler, which would be the Mexican, the poor, and the constitutionalists, those are the three categories of people who are free travelers on the public road. More than you believe, right? More than you would expect are in that category. No insurance. They may have a tag for the car, but that's about it. That's just to avoid suspicion, to avoid being stopped. But if they're stopped, they don't have the proper papers, and that's a very, very large group of people. Though we've had extant in Tennessee the compulsory insurance statute for, I don't know, 3 or 4 decades now. There's still people who refuse to honor it because they can't. They're too poor to honor it. And we are, though we are said to be a rich nation, and the jibber jabber coming out of Washington wants us to believe that we are a great people, a wealthy and noble and wealthy rich people. We're not. And so part of the reason we're not is that we have too much in commerce and we have too little done personally, and you might say familially. And so these forms, these records, I would say should be entirely open, but not perhaps the Social Security number. SSNs are I hope in 2 or 3 generations out, I hope they're gone. I hope people will say, I'm not getting an SSN, period. I'm not giving them to my children. But we all do from an economic inducement, because most people voluntarily file tax returns. And though they're not liable for the same, and they want to get a deduction for their children, and so they get these numbers, though some have strong religious motivations not to, strong reservations about it. And others, not religiously motivated, are aware of the legal implications of putting your son or daughter, your newborn, into a bondage to pay the national debt past now $21 trillion. It won't be paid, and it's not a real debt, but it's an obligation and a claim that the system has upon your descendants. Well, okay. So what do we need to think about this story? I'd say that these records should be entirely open at every point, because the people who have driver's licenses, who are involved in commerce and insurance, are in commerce, right? They're public people. If you are traveling the road privately, you are a private person, right? You have a private interest being on the road. You're there for your pleasure. your own will, for your own private needs and purposes, unaccountable to anybody, right? Because you're an innocent and harmless American and Tennessean, and cannot be stopped for simply privately traveling. But those in public, right? Those who have gone to the state and admitted that they are in commerce, they admit that they are carriers, they admit that they are carrying people and goods for hire, they are common carriers. That's what every licensee effectively admits. That is his effective legal admission that puts him under the state's authority. You become a licensee, you become a driver, you become an operator of a motor vehicle, you become the operator of a passenger motor vehicle or what have you, a truck. Those are all legal classifications. These are not neutral terms. Though the trend in the dictionary and the trend even in legal encyclopedias to neutralize the commercial notes, right? The commercial flavor, to take out the commercial flavor. Even though that's happening, it's kind of hard to see anymore what the words mean. Those are all commercial terms. What if you're a private traveler behind the steering wheel, moving yourself about in your own conveyance, right? What if you're one of those people, right? Notice the difference in vocabulary. Well, and you have an accent with someone who's in commerce. Well, I think the officer should respect, and at some point there'll be a case that will make it clear that the officer has to respect the private user who's not a licensee and who's using the road as a matter of constitutional right. I had lunch with an attorney the other day, and I brought this point up, and I said, so when the 1937 Driver's License Act passed, did it destroy any constitutional right? And he said no. There was no constitutional right to go about by car before. And I said, well, everybody prior to 1930, in 1936, prior to the passage of that act, drove privately. And how can you say now that when the state regulates commerce and regulates travel by car and truck as commerce and requires everybody to get a driver's license, that didn't destroy a constitutional right? Well, the problem for him is that if it destroyed a constitutional right, the statute's unconstitutional because it destroyed a right. If the statute is constitutional, that means that it created two categories of users of the road, the regulated user and then the private user. And I have a call here. By the way, the number is 800-8949. 800-8949 is the number. And caller, you're live on the air with David Tulis. What's on your mind?
I think one of the reasons I like Trump, he and I are alike. We're Northerners, and we say what we think. And this is the biggest waste of time issue. It is the biggest way, and I see patriots wasting their time since the 70s. As I said, David, I challenged this issue, and I traveled without a license, and I won in court. But I won't teach anyone how to do it for several reasons. It's a waste of time to bring it up. Most people are drivers. They're not using their conveyance. They're using a heavy vehicle. They're like the military that has been produced in interstate commerce. They have vehicle identification numbers. They have licenses. They have insurance. They have a note on the vehicle. And it's all properly regulated. This is a waste of time argument. It really is. I'm telling patriots, if you want to drive without a license, you're wasting your time. The state is not going to allow you to drive without a license or travel without a license. Well,
the state will not allow you to drive without a license, but the question is, can you travel?
They travel when they're in their little buggies. Now,
well, I think you're a constitutionalist, Mike, but you're
highways will probably get run over. But there are more important issues to talk about, and this is not one of them. And patriots are going to lose over and over again because they're making the wrong arguments.
Okay, well, listen, I do appreciate that, but listen, let me get to something else. We are talking about regulated activity, and because it's regulated, and the state assumes so, it claims a prior ownership of much property. Do you know that in 2016 there were 7,616 proceedings, according to a Knoxville state representative, against property along the roads of our state? The state, in its highwayman program, the Department of Safety overseeing that, seized $17,000 in cash and 3,636 cars and trucks, also called vehicles. And it did that, and the story that I want to get to, and I've gone long on my review here of this open record story. The what I want to get to is, what about when the state gets your stuff and won't let go? There's a story, an important piece that came out in AL.com, the Alabama newspaper, and it tells about the situation in Alabama, much like that in Tennessee. We have earlier this year in Nashville that the Department of Safety banquets don't count as police activity from 2014 to 2016. The DOS spent $112,614 in catering lunches, retail food, banquet tickets. Not okay, according to the Department of Justice, under the equitable sharing arrangement. That is to say, the equitable theft arrangement that the state and the federal government share together to run the Tennessee Highwayman program. But because these people are all in commerce, presumably they can be robbed at gunpoint, as it were. What is Gerald McCormick, state representative, doing about it?
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4.